According to Gaza's health ministry, on the 27th day of this conflict, 8,796 people have been killed in Palestine, 3,648 of them being children. 22,000 people have been injured. The most widely reported news yesterday was the opening of the Rafah crossing, which is the border between Gaza and Egypt. This opening allowed for 335 dual nationals to cross the border and 76 wounded, sick people to cross the border into Egypt for treatment. In response to these efforts and people crossing over the border into Egypt, the American President Joe Biden mentioned, and I quote, "Today, thanks to American leadership, we secured safe passage for wounded Palestinians and foreign nationals to exit Gaza." Similarly, the Israeli Foreign Ministry praised the entering of 61 humanitarian aid trucks into Gaza with the hashtag humanitarian aid for Gaza. With all of these aforementioned points mentioned regarding the reaching of aid to Gaza and Western countries like the United States of America praising the reaching of this aid to Gaza, some may ask a very, very important fundamental question, and that is, what is the role of this aid when Israel continues to exacerbate the humanitarian crisis on the ground in Gaza? On the 18th of October at the UN, we saw every single country that is part of the UN vote for a humanitarian pause, essentially a pause which would allow humanitarian aid to reach Gaza. The only country which vetoed this was the United States of America. So on one side we have Joe Biden, the American president, praising humanitarian aid reaching Gaza and attributing it to American leadership. And on the other side, on the 18th of October, we had the United States of America vetoing the decision for a humanitarian pause. Even though some may perceive this previous point as a clear contradiction, we do have, on the other hand, those who appreciate the support from the US regarding humanitarian aid reaching Gaza. However, is this humanitarian aid enough? We have a White House communications official, John Kirby, specifically explicitly mentioning on a White House social media account that even 100 trucks a day reaching Gaza would simply not be enough. With this aforementioned point, it would be useful to add that according to the UN, 80% of the population in Gaza needed aid, was aid dependent before the 7th of October. And this was before Israel's decision to cut off food, water, and electricity to the Gaza Strip, a move which was described by the European Union's chief diplomat, Josep Borrell, as being not in accordance with international law. Whilst America works diplomatically to secure aid for the Palestinians, on the other hand, we have the American Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, and the American Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, testify to the Senate Appropriations Committee on the 31st of October, requesting, amongst other things, $14.3 billion of funding for Israel. Those calling for a ceasefire understandably find it bizarre that on one hand, America is funding the exacerbation of a humanitarian aid crisis, whilst on the other hand working to alleviate its worst effects. As Gaza is still recovering from the bombing of the Jabalia refugee camp on Tuesday, which killed and injured hundreds of people, the question of humanitarian aid and support remains ever more pertinent.